I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the October 16, 2017 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details. Over the course of the last week or so, we've been looking at often overlooked details of the narrative of Exodus. And I want to go back to something that we talked about yesterday and a couple days before, and that is in Exodus chapters 13 and 14, we see the 10 plagues. We've talked about the fact that each of these was an attack or a polemic against the gods of the Egyptian pantheon. These polytheistic gods were represented often by animals or by the Nile, etc. And therefore, when Yahweh, the one true God of the Israelites, when he brought upon a plague, the Egyptians would have understood that that meant that their gods were not able to protect them. We talked yesterday about how it's very difficult for some people to conceive of the fact that God would kill the firstborn throughout Egypt. And when you realize what that really means, you realize that it was a lot of killing was going on that night. The angel of death was very, very busy. Because I want you to think about, are you a firstborn? Or, what about your best friend? Every single family in Egypt was affected, obviously, by the death of the firstborn in each generation. So you would have had uncles and aunts dying, as well as children, as well as old people, anyone who was the firstborn of their generation. It was a lot of death, and that included in the palace itself. That would have been the heir apparent, the Pharaoh in waiting, if you will, the firstborn son of Pharaoh himself would have been killed. And I was explaining yesterday that while that seems very harsh, I know, you have to understand that Pharaoh himself in Egyptian mythology was considered a god. He was considered the son of the greatest of the Egyptian gods, Ra. And one of the things that he was supposed to have was the responsibility for the continuation and prosperity of Egypt. Frankly, Pharaoh's worried greatly about long famines, for example. And we have hieroglyphs where it talks about the Pharaoh actually praying and all because there was a lack of rain in the land, or there was some kind of a famine going on, because it was a direct threat to his power. If the Pharaoh could not feed the people, if the Pharaoh could not sustain Egypt as a nation, that showed that he was not really a son of a god. And so that's why there was so much great emphasis placed in the Egyptian dynastic order on continuing the dynasty. When God struck down the firstborn in the house of Pharaoh and then throughout all of the nation, he was directly saying, look, your Pharaoh, who you think is a living God among you, who you have said is responsible for the future welfare of the nation, the continuation of the nation of the nation of Egypt, is unable to sustain that. It absolutely struck at the very control center of the empire. Because think about it, this was a nation that put the main emphasis, like many ancient nations, and even into, frankly, the modern world, primogenitor, the understanding that the firstborn son is going to inherit the property. The firstborn son is the head of the household. Well, if all of your firstborns are gone, that is showing that the whole underpinning of your society is at risk, and indeed the whole continuation of your society is at risk. So God is making a very clear point here, not just to the Pharaoh of long ago Egypt, but to everybody, that he is the God of nations. He causes nations to rise, he causes nations to fall. And whenever we get to thinking that we are in control of our politics, we are going to be in for a rude awakening, because God is going to do something that's going to make it clear that that is not the case. The other thing that we need to understand is although there's absolutely, as you know, I believe there is historical truth to the Bible, there's also symbolic truth as well. And Egypt, as we've talked about before, is seen as sin. That's why the Israelites, just like we, have to come out of the land of sin into a promised land. Well, the fact that God was striking at the underpinnings of Egyptian society, and more importantly, the continuation of Egyptian society, is symbolic that he is striking at the underpinnings of sin and a society, a worldview, a world system of sin, and that it will one day fall. God is got everything in his hands, my friends. And if you think that the world is running out of control, if you think that evil is winning, let me just say this. Always remember, there's going to be an end one day to sin. And it is in God's timing, and it is in his plan. Do not give up hope. I'm J. Lenore Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of The Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a marvelous day.